Our first grammar unit that we're going to cover this semester are sentence problems, and that includes fragments, run-ons, and comma splices. A fragment is an incomplete sentence. It may look like a complete sentence, it may be a long sentence, but if it is not a complete thought and has a subject and verb, then it is not a complete sentence. Sometimes a fragment's missing a verb or part of a verb. So if I look at this example, John working extra hard on his hook shot lately, well, I have a subject of John, I have what he's doing, but it still doesn't make sense. It's missing part of the verb. So to correct that, I would say John has been working extra hard on his hook shot lately. Or I could even say John, comma, working extra hard on his hook shot lately, comma, made 10 more points in the last game. That would correct it. Sometimes a fragment is also missing a subject. So you have a verb, but you don't have a subject. For example, wandering through the streets around midnight. Well, who was wandering through the streets around midnight? I don't know. I could add the teens were wandering through the streets around midnight, or maybe I like that phrase at the beginning, wandering through the streets around midnight, we witnessed an accident. Sometimes it's a dependent clause punctuated as a complete sentence. And to understand that terminology, let's cover the idea of an independent clause versus a dependent clause. An independent clause is a subject and a verb that makes a complete sentence. But a dependent clause is a subject and a verb that does not make a complete sentence. So we said a fragment might be missing a verb, or it might be missing a subject, or it might have the subject and verb, but it's a dependent clause and not an independent clause. Here's an example. Even though he aggravated the entire audience with his grotesque jokes. Well, I have a subject, he. I have a verb, aggravated. But that doesn't mean it's a complete sentence because the sentence does not make sense. I can take out even though and just say he aggravated the entire audience with his grotesque jokes. Or I can add an independent clause to that dependent clause, which makes it a complex sentence. Sometimes a sentence can, or a fragment can give you a lot of information. But if it is not a complete thought, then it is not an actual sentence. After the coach encouraged him so much last year, and he seemed to improve with each passing game, I even have 2 dependent clauses there, 2 subjects, 2 verbs, but it's not one complete thought. Be alert for prepositional phrases. Be alert for strings of them, that it almost feels like it's a run-on sentence. Well, it's not even one complete sentence, so it can't be a run-on. Immediately after the conclusion of the football game, with the crowds of people exiting the stadium, I have a lot going on in that phrase. But again, it's just a lot of prepositional phrases put together, and there's not one complete thought. So again, it doesn't matter the length. If it is not a complete thought or it leaves you hanging, it is not a sentence. The second type of error is a run-on. This is where we have 2 sentences joined with no separation. Look at this sentence here. Some students think they can study for an important exam by cramming all night. They are probably wrong. Well, I have 2 sentences or 2 trains connected, but they're going in separate directions. There's nothing connecting them, so it's not one sentence, it's 2 complete sentences. Where do I need to separate that sentence? Some students think they can study for an important exam by cramming all night. That's the end of the first sentence. Here's another one. They are probably wrong. Again, 2 sentences joined together with no separation. There are 4 ways to correct run-ons. First off, we can insert a period. Second way is a comma plus a coordinating conjunction. You can't just stick a comma between 2 sentences. That's called a comma splice, and we'll go over that in a second. But you have to have a comma plus a coordinating conjunction. There are 7 coordinating conjunctions. You probably remembered them by fanboys. They are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So can I join 2 sentences with a comma then? No. Then is not a coordinating conjunction. It has to be one of those. The third way to correct a run-on is to use a semicolon. Now, we don't want to always use a semicolon. We want to vary this up, but there is one way that you can correct a run-on is just by sticking a semicolon in between them. And you notice that you do not capitalize the next word after a semicolon unless it is a proper noun or proper adverb. Proper pronoun. The fourth way to correct run-ons is probably the most hardest way, is called subordination. Here's my run-on. Chung gets straight A's. He studies all the time. Well, I could put a period there after A's. I could put a comma for he studies all the time. I could put a semicolon. Or I could make one of these independent clauses into a dependent clause. Chung gets straight A's because he studies all the time. And you'll notice there is not a comma before the dependent clause if it comes at the end of the sentence. Chung, who studies all the time, gets straight A's. But at the beginning of the sentence, you do put commas around it or after it. Remember, if you have two or more complete thoughts in one sentence, they have to be separated in one of those four ways: a period, a comma and a coordinated conjunction, a semicolon, or subordination. The third type of sentence error is a comma splice, and it is very similar to a run-on. A comma splice connects two independent clauses with only a comma. You'll remember that a comma only was not one of the four ways. So if I look at this comma splice, my glasses are not strong enough. I cannot get to the eye doctor until next week. They've tried to separate the sentences, but you cannot join two sentences with just a comma. How do I fix a run-on and a comma splice? The same way. My glasses are not strong enough, period. I cannot get to the eye doctor until next week. My glasses are not strong enough, comma, but, coordinated conjunction. Use a semicolon or use subordination. Even though my glasses are not strong enough, comma, I cannot get to the eye doctor until next week. That is not a comma splice. That is just a real good sentence because the first part is a dependent clause and the second part is an independent clause. Let's try a few of these on our own. If you want to pause the video, you can, or you can just follow along with me. Carlos took the job and he was happy to get it. Carlos took the job. That's a sentence. He was happy to get it. That's a sentence. Can I join two sentences with just a coordinated conjunction and? No, it's a run-on. It needs a comma. Tono loves Chinese food. He eats it 3 times a week. Well, that's a comma splice. The first part's a sentence, the second part's a sentence. I can't join two sentences with just a comma. Lovey congratulated Jake and wished him success. Now, your first instinct may to say, oh, it's a run-on because I don't have a comma before the and. But in this case, it is just a sentence because Lovey congratulated Jake. That's a sentence. But can I say wished him success? No, that's just two things that Lovey did. He congratulated and wished. It's one complete thought. Go to college. It is worth the effort. Those are two commands. Commands don't have a subject. They have an understood subject. That's two sentences. It's a run-on. Tell me a good joke, and I will tell you a better one. Tell me a good joke. That's a command. It's a sentence. I will tell you a better one. That's a sentence. I can't join two sentences with just an and. It's a run-on. The American public loves football. Television ratings indicate this preference. Two sentences joined with only a comma. You should have put comma splice. Number 7, we support and appreciate you. One complete thought. It is a sentence. After the rain ended and the golf committee announced that play would begin, I have a subject, rain. I have a verb, ended. I even have another subject, committee, and another verb, announced, but it's not a complete thought, so it is a fragment. Several players not caring about the team as a whole. I'm missing a verb in that sentence, so it's a fragment. And number 10, despite the negative attention, the president decided to let the controversial play go as scheduled. It is not a comma splice because what comes before the comma is not a sentence. It's just one complete thought. Hopefully this video and the PowerPoint will help you. You've got some practice to complete this week before you take the quiz. So make sure you review the video maybe again, look over the sentence errors practice, look over the answers, look in your Seagull handbook as well if you want to look in that handbook for some extra information. Maybe they will say it a different way or a way that makes more sense to you. But you can look at fragments in your handbook, and if you'll wait just a second, I'll give you those page numbers. It's in sentence errors and sentence fragments section. The sentence fragments is found on page 317, and then your run-ons and comma splices are right after that unit, or actually on pages 272 to 275. So those additional pages will help you as well.